Hey guys, so one of the cool things about Patreon here is that I can pretty much make videos on anything that I find interesting or that I think you guys will find useful, and I don't really have to worry about any sort of YouTube algorithm. I don't have to worry about any analytics or stats or worrying about my video getting a certain amount of views. I can really just focus on teaching you guys and not worry at all about that extra stuff. So in this quick lesson here, I wanted to show you guys something really cool, and what it is a chord substitution. And what a chord substitution is, in its simplest form, it's simply a type of chord that you can replace another chord with inside of a chord progression. Now, typically there are a whole bunch of qualifiers and parameters and things you have to pay attention to make sure that you're allowed to actually make that substitution in that spot. But this one that I'm going to show you is super simple, and it pretty much works in 100% of cases, which is very cool. And to understand this, we have to go back to the number system, which if you've watched any of my free YouTube videos, you should be familiar with. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the 5 chord in a major key and the 3 chord in a major key. So for example, in the key of C major, we'd have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B. As for our chords in the key of C major, we would have our 1 chord, which is a C major, 2 chord, which is a D minor, 3, which is E minor, 4, which is F major, 5, G major, 6, A minor, and then for our 7 chord, we'd have that B half diminished right there. Now, like I said, the ones we want to take a special look at are our 5 chord and our 3 chord. And what this substitution is it's essentially saying that anywhere you play that 5 chord, you can substitute it with a dominant 7/3 chord. Now, don't get scared off. It's super simple. All I mean by that is where our 3 chord is, which in this case, in the key of C major, it is an E minor, right? So 1, 2, 3, if you're using the road maps. We can also play 3 as an open E minor right there. It might be a little bit easier to see. But that 3 chord, we're gonna make it a dominant 7 chord. So the shape looks like this. And this gives us an E dominant 7 chord. So E minor is our typical 3 chord. Instead, we've got an E dominant 7 right there. And what we can do is if we play a chord progression that uses the 5, we're going to replace that 5 with that dominant 7/3 chord. So what I mean by that is instead of playing a G in this key of C major, I'm going to play that chord right there, an E dominant 7. And it sounds like it's going to be a little bit confusing, but it's not. So to give you a good example, a 1, 5, 6, 4. So now I'm going to play and I'll go back to the 5 there. The dominant 7. And alternatively, if you feel like that's a little bit too much spice for you, you can just play it as a 3 chord. The 3 chord does a really good job of replacing your 5 chord. It just sounds like it's walking up to the 6 or walking down to the 5. So if I were to play a different progression, if I were to say go from a 6 to a 5 to a 4 to a 1. So something like this. I'm going to now replace that 5. So you can see there's definitely a very different sound, but unlike using other chords in that position, if I were to replace that 5 chord with a 2, or I were to replace it with a 1 or a 7, it's not going to do the same thing. Essentially what this is doing is it's working the exact same way as that 5 chord. So even if my vocal melody were to stay the same, it wouldn't matter if I played a 5 chord or that dominant 7/3 chord. Now, the one thing you really have to look out for is what the bass is doing. So if the bass player were to play that 5 right there, then it's probably going to clash a little bit too much. But a lot of bass players, when they see a 5, they will just play a 3. So that's just an E, a regular E note. And because obviously with bass, they're only playing 1 note, it gives you the freedom to play either an E minor there, you can play an E dominant 7 there, or you can play that regular 5 chord there. Okay, so we can do this in any other key as well. Let's do it in the key of G major, very standard key that you'd play in. So we've got our 1, 2, 3 right there, 4, 5, 6. We also have our 3 right here, so we can play our 3 there. So we'll play our dominant 7 chord there in this key. And let's play the chord progression E minor, D major, C major, G major. So 6, 5, 4, 1. And we're just going to replace that 5 again with that dominant 7/3 chord. Now, another important thing just to pay attention to is that there are going to be times, depending on which chord you're going to next, that chord, it's going to work, but it's not going to sound as good as the 5 chord. So for example, if you're starting on the 5 chord in a chord progression, then maybe you're not going to want to replace that with that dominant 7/3 chord. But when you're moving kind of between other chords and then that 5 chord is in between, it's going to work great. And that's all I wanted to show you in this little video. Something that can maybe help you with your songwriting, or even just if you're playing over another song or playing someone else's song, something you can kind of test out and try out. So thank you so much for being one of my first supporters. I honestly, truly am so grateful. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, I will see you in the next one.